Pannavamsa, everyone. Let us chant Namo Tassa before the start of the session. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. Today's Deshana has been organized at the request of Khanti and Vimalala Kohun, who resides in the UK, in spirit of her beloved sister's birthday, Sudharma De Silva, who resides in Sydney. So Mrs. De Silva's birthday falls on the 8th of January, which is today. And I hope that everyone with me wishes her the best of the Dhamma, the best of health, the best of everything wholesome in the world on her birthday. So Khanti and Vimal have requested that I do a Deshana in spirit of her birthday and to also share blessings, but to also sort of create the occasion to listen to some Dhamma. So the topic that I've chosen for today is with regards to thought, conflicting thoughts or thoughts of any nature, and peace, right? And peace. When we look at the Dhamma that has been presented, laid down, taught by Buddhas, our Buddha and all Buddhas before him, we find that the Buddha does not speak about a process, a way that eradicates thought. The Buddha does not speak in bringing on a practice where we completely eradicate thought, but he teaches us a process, a path, where these thoughts, intrusive, conflicting thoughts, would be better streamed by a mind which is tamed, which is yoked by the master, by a person who gives some sort of consideration to the mind and what arises within this mind. Now, the Buddha speaks about what we know in Pali as the word mala, right? Mala is like rust, right? Malakada, mala. Now, the Buddha speaks about mala, or this rust, as something that arises from the steel that eats, and is the same that eats into the steel. The mala arises from the steel that continues to now destroy what it arose from. I find this description very apt in a way that the thoughts, nurtured, spirited, molded by the attachment that we have, or the identity that we protect, the identity that is connected to the akusala that eats at the person who adopted such views in the first place. So the mala, this rust, does not destroy another person, but it destroys the person who created it in the first place. It destroys the mind that harbors it in the first place. It destroys the practitioner's practice where it arose within. Now, when we look at thought, In the Abhidharma, we find that there are 89 types of consciousness, out of which thought can arise with regards to akusala, where there are 12 chittas, and then it can also arise in the kusala chittas, where we do kusala with, right? Where we do kusala with, in both the akusala and the kusala. Thought also arises within the first lokottara chitta, connected to, or the first and the second, depends on the sutra technique or the Abhidharma technique, connected to the first and the second jhana, but that is not important for this. When we look at the consciousnesses, these consciousnesses would have something called vitakka and vichara. This vitakka vichara creates or is our nature, or what we identify as thought arising within us. This vitakka and vichara creates a certain reality where whatever part or piece of thought or consciousness or object rather that arises at that moment creates a sense of hypnosis, where now that object which appears, whether it be something beautiful, whether it be something which is not so pleasant to look at, regardless of the object, it creates a sense of hypnosis where we completely find ourselves entrenched within that object. When this happens, we think that this object is worthy of our time, is sustained in self, is an object that will prolong, is an object that is permanent, is an object with a certain sense of awe, not a certain sense, but in a complete sense of solidity. We cannot be more wrong about it. Right. At a moment when we look at something and we find ourselves completely engrossed within something, we are overwhelmed with the consciousness that that object then creates. If the object was taken with a sense of lobha, greed, then we find ourselves obsessing with greed. If the object creates a sense of anger, we find ourselves obsessing with anger. If the object creates or is created or founded within delusion, we find delusion now arising. In all of these cases, what do we find? We find a person unmindfully, without awareness, entrenched within an object which is within itself, within its core, impermanent in nature. We find an object that is not long enduring, but it arises and passes away, impermanent. However, the hypnosis here is we believe permanence in that which is not permanent. Right. But this is now, there starts the rust. What was the rust? The unmindful or the taking of object with a mind that is not mindful. So we started to believe that this is true. What I'm feeling is true. What this object or what I think this object is true. What the thoughts, the beliefs that has arisen connected to the object is true. The feeling of the object is true. The desire towards the object is true. Get what I mean? That everything connected with that object is true. Now, where did the rust start? Or where did we give way for this mala to arise? At the taking of object with the lack of awareness. That is where the mala arose. Now, because that mala arose, now where did the rust start eating at the steel, making the person weaker? Where now we gave in to the thoughts that arose connected to it. where we thought the desire, the Vedana, the feeling, the other thoughts that followed, creating a scenario where it is like quicksand, where we go deep and deeper, the more we struggle. In that sense, now the rust was created by us, and because it started eating at the steel. Thoughts are both connected to good and the bad. Thoughts are something that we will never be rid of. As long as we live, thought will arise. However, we must not mistake ourselves to assume that thoughts control us, which is not true, which doesn't have to be true. For some people, it might be true, but it necessarily does not have to be true. There is a path of practice laid down by the Buddha. There is a path of practice spirited in samatha and vipassana, which allows people to now take power back into their hands. Right? Take power back into their hands. In the Abhidhamma, vitakka and vichara are found, initial application, sustained application, are found in the 12 akusala chittas, and almost all of the kusalas up to the first and the second jhana of the supramundane chittas. We find vitakka and vichara. Right? Vitakka and vichara. Now, when we look at that, we will see vitakka and vichara is not the issue here. If vitakka and vichara is the issue, vitakka and vichara, this thought should not arise all the way up to the jhanas and beyond into the supramundane jhanas. Vitakka and vichara, thought is not the issue here. How we think becomes the issue. How we think becomes the issue. What supports our pattern of thinking? What essence of mind supports life becomes the reason for these destructive thoughts, conflicting thoughts, intrusive thoughts to arise. The near enemy, the foe of clarity. The way we think. What are the positions in our daily lives that brings about the lack of clarity? What should I do next? In most instances, we feel a sense of anger connected to the past. But within the Dhammapada itself, what does the Buddha say? The person who says, this person did this to me, that person did that to me, will never attain nirvana. Why? Because that person is not working to attain nirvana. That person is too busy obsessing over the past which has passed. The person is busy obsessing over the feelings that have arisen and passed in the past, but still obsessing, so bringing it to light again and again and again. So the past is something that we have to, when it passes, be able to let go. Be able to let go. For the health of everyone concerned, especially for ourselves. Clinging on to the past does not bring good. It only creates the conditions for us to further wreak ourselves in the stains, in suffering, in the present. So letting go of the past eliminates a lot of the anguish and troubles that we hold in our minds through comparative thought. And then comes a person. Now, if the person lets go of the past, he is not conditioned, or he does not use the past as a threshold to determine the present, then what happens? What is the next step? The assumption that our lives should be a certain way. This too, if we dwell deeper, is truly made in the past. Our lives must be in a certain way. We have to have these sorts of feelings in our life. Our life should go in such a manner. The Buddha to that says, right? People spend their time thinking about this sun and that sun, right? Sun, S-O-N. When we do not have our own minds under control or within our control, what about this sun and that sun? We keep thinking about things that we can't control or things that we cannot hold on to, assuming that it should be of a certain way. Being able to bring ourselves, let us forget about all the deep Dhamma, even if we are able to go into just the Dhammic commitment to let go of the past, to stop worrying over things that we are unable to control, to bring ourselves into a position of ease, thinking whatever that arises in my life, be it thought that brings me happiness or thoughts that brings me suffering or pain, these are the vicissitudes of life. This is a part of the Maha Dukkha Kanda. This is that which a person in samsara has to experience. Then the whole that these experiences, emotions have in our life is reduced. The power that it exercises over us is further reduced. We are not foolishly engaging ourselves with a reality that is not real. Because as we know, it is the defiled who train themselves to attain enlightenment. Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and Arahants were all once unenlightened. This commitment that we make to the path of practice, when we think about all of the things that have happened in our lives, the past memories, the emotions, and everything that we on a daily basis think of again and again and again, it can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite overwhelming. So that is where, when the Buddha speaks about, we know that in Buddhism, meditation is very important because it helps us. And if you do it with me, in just taking a deep breath in, everyone, and just letting it go. And as you let go of the breath, just relaxing all of your senses, your body, the mind, just easing yourself, allowing yourself to have a moment of relaxation. Let us take another breath. Deep breath in, centering ourselves in the present and letting go of the breath. And we take another deep breath in and just let it go. See, everyone. This is why the Buddha asked us to meditate. This is why the Buddha said that a practice of samatha or vipassana or both is integral, because it helps us with all the noise that we hear in our lives. The noises that we take in from sights that we see, the smells, the taste, the things that we hear, the things that we feel, pain, pleasure, whatever it is. It is like a wave that carries a bottle somewhere. It is like the currents of an ocean. We are always moving, we are always moving. Sometimes we just aimlessly move, unknowing. We do not even know where we are going, where we are heading, but we just simply move. Why? We are lost in the currents. We are lost in these sense experiences. We are lost in lobha, dosa, moha. We are lost in a sense of grappling onto each and every object that appears in our life. We find ourselves just flowing, just flowing. And sometimes we want to achieve and attain, but then that need to achieve and attain is disrupted by again the currents taking over. The currents taking over. But when we just take a deep breath in and just let go, even for 3 seconds, what do we find? We find ourselves just settling within the moment, instantly bringing on a sense of deep clarity and profound peace. Where did that peace arise from? It is not that I am enlightened. It is not that we are without greed. It is not that we require nothing more from the world. It is not that we have no ambitions. It is not that we do not want to do things for our families or anything of the sort. It is simply in the fact that we choose to be present that clarity arises. It is simply in the fact that we stop being that bottle whose direction is determined by the currents and the waves, that we simply come to this sense of peace. It is in not giving in to the sights, the smells, the tastes, the feels, not because of anything rigid or the nature within us to control everything that we do or where we go, but simply in just being in the moment. In the moment. This is very profound as an experience, because the mind which was disturbed, deluded, angry, lusting, the mind that wanted, almost instantly, if you did it with me, you find just simply relaxed. I mean, what an amazing, great tool to incorporate into our lives. We realize when we meditate and when we taste a sense of peace, that peace, however turbulent our life might be, is accessible to you and I, then it makes us question, why was I so stuck up on this and that? Why did I feel so powerless? That is exactly the thing that the Buddha says. The rust. When a person in the Bala Vagga, in the Mala Vagga and the Bala Vagga in the Dhammapada is regarding the fools, Mala Vagga, or rust and the taints, the kileshas. These kileshas, although it might be a big word to those of you who do not study Buddhism, these kileshas are kileshas which are very much things that we experience on a daily basis. You and I are both conditioned by these kileshas. However, the problem becomes not the kileshas, but the fact that we have given up our entire control to the kileshas. To the kileshas. Where then we drift deep into samsara, carried away by the currents of the kileshas. The Buddha says, right? The Buddha says, Maletya duttaritam, right? meaning ducharitam is bad or unwholesome actions, right? Unwholesome actions, misconduct. Mala, malitya. Mala, to a woman, misconduct is her taint, right? Is a taint. Macharyan dadato malam. Dadato means a person who gives. Danapatya. A person who gives. What is a taint of a person who gives? Macharyan. Stinginess. You're giving, but you're stingy. Right? It is a taint, the Buddha says. How can a person who's giving be stingy? That now eats at the thing or the action of giving. Malave papaka dhamma. To a person in this world, right? This rust, these taints, papaka dhamma. A person takes up unwholesome practices, misconduct, all of that. A person who takes over the taints takes over or becomes misconduct itself. Tato mala malatara. The worst of all of those taints, however, is ignorance. Ignorance. Now, is it not with ignorance, everyone, that we fed life into something that was lifeless? Is it not with ignorance that I assumed permanence in something that was impermanent? Is it not with ignorance that I hated and continue to hate, destroying my virtues, my morals, my peace? And of course, in the process, maybe also creating damage to another person. Is it not with ignorance that we assumed that all of these consciousnesses, emotions, feelings will not pass? Is it not with ignorance that we thought that the Buddha's Dhamma cannot be practiced daily? Is it not with ignorance that we give so much of power to the callous mind and not the awareness-based mind? Ignorance, we did not realize that these things were so. Sometimes when it happens right before our eyes, tato malaratam, avijja pramanang malam, paranang malam. Avijja is the greatest of ignorance. Avijja is the greatest of ignorance. Etang malang bhaktvana, the Buddha says, those taints, this rust, give it up, pahatva, right? Give it up, give up subscribing, associating yourself with such ignorance-based acts. Nimmala hota bhikkhavo. Be without rust, be without the taints. He says to the bhikkhus. Now see, everyone, we cannot all just now, maybe we cannot just get rid of the taints in our life. But what we can do is this. We can have the right attention to subscribe to a peaceful way and pattern of life. We can tell ourselves, I'm not going to remind myself of the past and things that happened in the past and suffer with the past. People who might have created those sufferings might have passed away. People who have created those sufferings might be having dementia and Parkinson's or something of the sort. People might have forgotten what they've done to you, but we are still suffering. We are still suffering. We have become puppets of those experiences. What we can say is, no, I'm not going to give myself any more suffering. I'm not going to subscribe to those pains of the past. I'm going to try to live in the present. Right? When unwholesome states of mind appear, I'm not going to give in to them. What will arise will pass away. Can we not say that, everyone? When we have a sense of anger, when we have a sense of lusting for something, greed, can we not bring up a mind which says, this is impermanent, this will pass, and not let that anger, that lust, that delusion proliferate in the mind? If we are unable to do that, what have we cultivated? Now, because we can do that, according to the teachings of the Buddha, that is exactly what we have to try to do. To stop the cycle from spinning again. To stop the cycle which spins again. In the Fool's Balabhagga, the Buddha says, when it comes to akusala, the fool enjoys it up until the repercussion starts to flow. Right? We rejoice at our anger, we rejoice at our greed, we rejoice at our delusion sometimes, right? Or sometimes most of the time, up until we start experiencing the vipakas of those actions, the vipakas of the akusala, the vipaka of all the wrong that has been done. But the kusala mind is far more stronger than the akusala mind. The kusala mind arises from a state of beauty and it transgresses akusala in every aspect, whilst akusala drags us down. The moment, although we might be people or we might have experiences or doings in the past that are quite bad, if we are able to, even at this moment, not with avidya but with prajna, come to realize that at those times what we actually were, like those bottles drifting in the seas aimlessly, giving into akusala, giving into our thoughts, destroying peace. If we are able to realize and come into realization of the fact that we were actually, as the Buddha says, beings that are aimlessly wandering in samsara, creating more formations of mind that keeps us entrenched in samsara and the dirt of samsara, and now even with a little bit of Dhamma, even with a little bit of Dhamma, we come to realize the mistakes that were done in the past, but we give in to the Dhamma so authentically, genuinely, that we can now identify, separate ourselves from the person who was in the past and be in the present as a person who has some sort of virtue. This is important. In our Sri Lankan Buddhist culture, we have the taking of the 5 precepts. This is what the 5 precepts is supposed to do. But I often feel that because we give out the 5 precepts so often, right? Or we recite the 5 precepts so often, we have lost the value of the 5 precepts, or in the recitation of the 5 precepts. Right. The 5 precepts during the time of the Buddha When bhikkhus entailed offenses, the bhikkhus, of course, had another set of rules. When samaneras had entailed offenses, what would they do? As a samanera, when you break any one of the precepts, you're supposed to immediately report to your senior, and the senior, and you're supposed to confess your sin, or you're supposed to confess your misdoings to the senior, and the senior will reprimand or advise or do whatever with regards in consulting or in whatever the transgression was. And then the 10 precepts would be initiated again. After, of course, a good admonition, a good advice given to the Samanera, not just, not just given. The Samanera would have to sort of go through, some sort of advice or counseling. And then the Samanera would have this motivation to not break that rule again, right? Break that rule. Some might think, with all the things that are happening in Sri Lanka and across, that these things don't happen or doesn't matter, but it really does. It really does. And there are people, monks, who give or have a great sense of importance to such things. And then the monks, they start sort of, practicing again. This is the same thing with the lay people, right? When it comes to the precepts, for a person who is practicing, the precepts are very important. The precepts are important for their morals, their practice, for their samadhi. So when a precept breaks, we go and sort of take the precepts again. And the taking of the precepts would then motivate the people to try better. This is important. It is just as if what really happens is we have given into hatred, we have given into lust, we have given into delusion. Now this is the rehabilitation process that takes place. So in this manner, we find thought and that which hurts peace. And then on the other side, we find peace. On the other end, when we let go of those intrusive, or when we let go of kilesa, right? When we let go of our dependence on kilesa to make ourselves feel good. And as we go on this path, as we travel on this path, in every aspect, having this sense of centeredness, this ability of being aware when the kilesas arise, this becomes the main practice. I feel as if sometimes we are seeking more and more and more. What is the Dhamma? What is the Dhamma? What is the Dhamma? This is the Dhamma, right? This is the Dhamma. And often we seek deeper and deeper Dhammas because of our inability to do what is simple. And what is simple, everyone? හැම මොහොතම යෝනිසෝ මනසිකාරයෙන් ජීවත් වීම. To have right attention in our daily lives. What is right attention? We are not mechanical. This is not a mechanical process. Right attention comes when we have shraddha. Right attention comes when we have prajna. Right attention arises to a person who has morals and values. Right attention arises for a person who has virya with regards to prajna, saddha, and moral values. Right? So when that sense of sila that we have, that sila can go beyond panadipata, adinadana, kamesu michachara, musavada, suramere. It can go beyond that to not hurting yourself or another person. When it comes to sila, any one of you can try. even on the fact of I have not hurt myself, I have not hurt another. On that thought, everyone, samadhi can arise. Samadhi can arise. Any thought that is blameless, that has kusala in its foundation, not wanting to hurt yourself nor another person, that is a blameless thought. ඒකේ කිසිම වැරද්දක් නැහැ ඒ සිතුවිල්ල තුල. On that thought, samadhi can arise. What is samadhi? A sense of peace. Samadhi has a sense of clarity in it, has a sense of one-pointedness in it, has a sense of subscription to that which is good. Its foe enemy is restlessness, covetousness. Those natures come up with akusala. So then, when we have shraddha, when we have virya, when we have prajna, when we have sila, right? Still we might see, okay, I'm pursuing. But still, especially when we live with family, some, it can be quite, akusala can easily arise, right? Because arguments can happen, small things. But sometimes these small things also affect you, right? So then what happens? The prajna, if it is a person who's working on the prajna or working with prajna, the prajna needs to be refined. How does the prajna be refined? How can the prajna be refined? Or what does that really mean? What it means is, we need to understand how we can apply the yonisomansikara. Right? Now we are trying to apply yonisomansikara or live with yonisomansikara, right attention. But how do we apply the yonisomansikara? Is something that comes to question then. That has to be founded on, it can be unique to each and every person. The yonisomansikara would, however, be blameless. It will not create stress. What we can first do as a first step is the assumption that our mind will remain like this all the time. Do you understand? ලෞකික මිනිස්සෙක් හිතනවා ධර්මයේ කියවන පමණින් පොඩ්ඩක් භාවනා කරන පමණින් හැම වෙලේම අපිට කුසල් චේතනාවෙන් ජීවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. කුසලෙන් ජීවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. We assume just because we meditate a little bit, just because we practice a little bit, just because we read a bit of Dhamma, that we will be able to, from the get-go, be in kusala all the time. Now, is that not an assumption placed? Is that not the sort of the thought that this kusala mind is long enduring? Are we not now creating another self, trying to mold ourselves into creating something which will not just arise? So now, a kusala happens. Now let us say during this Dhamma class, a bus driver, in a very unnecessary manner, honks the horn, right? Honks the horn. A small irritation arises. Mindlessly, because of my commitment to this session, I proliferate, right? I proliferate. Now I proliferated, I gave in, maybe for a minute, right? Now I am disgusted, or I am in doubt of myself, or I am wondering why. Why did that happen? Now I give in to it even further, over the assumption that that shouldn't have happened. What does that do? That multiplies akusala. Right? That multiplies akusala. Again, now We find ourselves, we try, we put our attention into Dhamma, and we assume that this will just happen. It will not just happen. It is again up and down. The Buddha's impermanence, or when the Buddha say anicca, anicca refers to kusala and akusala. In assuming that the akusala will prolong, in assuming that kusala will prolong, in both aspects there is dukkha. In both aspects, suffering arises. So when akusala arises or kusala arises, at both of those moments, we let go. We do not play. Because that is not where my life is. It is not in the bus drive that my life is. It is not the pinkama that I did where my life is. It is not the beautiful vacation that I went on where my life is. The life that I'm experiencing is in the present. And me holding on to anything that has already passed, be it kusala or akusala, in a manner that I wish that it repeats, that I ignorantly wish, as if I assume that this reality is going to become my reality again, I assume that it will prolong. I assume permanent in something that is stricken in impermanence. That is ignorance. That is avijja. We find, everyone, that this ignorance infects the prajna, the shraddha, the virya, and of course, by de facto, the morals. Right? Regardless, when it does, we do not take it to heart in a manner that we guilt trip ourselves into multiplying the akusalas. Rather, that too, let us let it go. It is only people who are going somewhere who would trip and fall. If you're in one place, how will you fall? You have to go on this journey, and you will, for sure, you will fall. But make sure that you get back up. Just because you trip and fall, if you're going to be having a siesta in the middle of the road, that is not something that is to be done. You get back up. How do we get back up? Determine, come into awareness, determine not to do it again, motivate yourself, continue. And continue. Continue to walk on the path. Continue to not subscribe to lobha, dosa, moha. And when that happens, you will have your sense of peace again. This sense of peace or peace is, everyone, a lifestyle. It is the way that you think. It is the way that you behave. It is in when the Buddha says, for any person who goes into or wants to become ordained, there are a couple of questions that is the Sangha asks. One of those questions being, do you have permission of your family, or if you're married, of your spouse? Why? To avoid conflict. Are you in debt? Why? To avoid conflict. When we do things that are wrong, when we do things that we cannot have or face with confidence, what happens? Chakkang vaha vahato padam. Like a wheel coming behind you, it will follow you through your life. Just as the Buddha says, the wise will rejoice in unwholesome, in akusala, the fools will rejoice in akusala up until the akusala starts giving fruit. When we start bearing the fruits of our akusala, everyone will be frustrated. We'll ask why, and I'm sure we have all asked at one point, we have asked, what have I done in samsara to be deserving this? Akusala. That is what you've done. That is what we've all done. Not because we did it with the right frame of mind. We did it mindlessly. That is what made it worse. We did it because we were foolish. That we gave in to the akusalas, that we gave in to the kileshas, that we gave in to the tide of the world. That is what we did. There's no more question about it. And those fruits of the akusala we are now reaping. The seeds that we once sowed, we are now reaping. It is a part of that reaping process that you and I are born into this world to go through kusala, akusala all over again, to do the same things that we've been doing in samsara again and again and again and again. We have been born into this world, everyone. This is not something to do your head in by thinking again and again. මේ සංසාරේ ජීවත් වෙන්න, මේ සංසාරේ ආපහු ඉපදෙන්න අකුසල් කරපු හින්දා කුසල් නොකරපු හේතුවෙන් නිවන් නොදක්ක හේතුවෙන් අපි මේ සංසාරේ තාම දුක් විඳිනවා. So the only thing that we can do is to do what we could not do before. What did we not do before? Effectively walk on a path of Dhamma. That is exactly what we didn't do. From all the Buddhas that arose, right, we are at the end of our Chakravala universe cycle now. We did not attain Nirvana. මොකද ඒ කාලවල වලත් අපි සමහර වෙලට සත්තු වෙලා ඉපදෙන්නේ නැති, යක්කු වෙලා ඉන්නේ නැති, බුදුහාමුදුරු ගොල්ලොට රාතන් වහන්සේලාට පච්චේක බුදුවරුන්ට අපි බනින්නේ නැති, ඒක එක අකුසල් කරන්නේ නැති, නිරය අපායවල වල අපි ගින්නේ පිච්චි පිච්චි ඉන්නේ නැති. ඒ හින්දා අපිට මොනවාරි හේතුවක් හින්දා අපිට නිවන් දකින්න බැරි වුණා. But now at least we are human. At least we have a mind that works. At least we can make the efforts, even the little effort that we require to bring a sense of peace into our life by not subscribing to akusala, to creating more sankharas that will lengthen the suffering in this universe, to lengthen the suffering that we have to undergo in this samsara. We can at least now take up the determination to say, I am not going to cling on to the past anymore. I am not that person. I have grown. Time has passed. I forgive my enemies. I forgive those who have transgressed, who have hurt me. And just like other people have hurt me in the past, or maybe even now, how many people might I have hurt in this samsara? For me to undergo this pain, how many people might have I given this pain to? Think about that. We reap what we sow according to karma. So maybe we have hurt so many people in samsara that we are going through this. This is samsara, everyone. This is samsara. We live and receive the energies that we have given. ඒක ගැන හරි හිතලා අපි අතීතයේ ජීවත් වීම එරෙහිව අපි වර්තමාන මොහොතේ ජීවත් වෙන්න ඉගෙන ගත්තොත්, අපි මේ වර්තමාන මොහොතේ තුල කුසල් අපිට ටිකක් හරි අපිට කුසලෙන් ජීවත් වෙන්න අපිට යම්කිසි උද්‍යෝගයක් අපිට තිබ්බොත් මේ අවස්ථාවේ, maybe we are unable to practice all of the precepts, but it's great if you can. But even if you are able to live with the truth that since the day that I came into a true realization, I have not hurt or done anything to hurt myself, nor other people. If we are able to come into such a state of mind, everyone, we will have peace in our lives. We can live a happier sense, with a happier sense of being. We can be in a sense of presence. and we can face the inevitable experiences of life that you and I will have to face. Maybe it be today or tomorrow or day after or years in advance, regardless, to face these experiences, being in the present. Because what we know through experience, you and I, is that giving over the power of our thought and our lives to everything around us, to the different senses, sense experiences, which we have all been doing for so long, never does bring a sense of peace. We will always have another thing to do, assuming that this will make me happier. But happier, we forget, exists on a spectrum. If you want happiness, that object or that thing that brings about happiness will always fade because it is impermanent. This is not because of you or not I. This is how the world is. The sun must set. The sun, although it shines, does not mean that we can have it all the time. We will have day and night. We cannot have the sun all the time. It's just the way it is. Impermanence is nothing to do with you nor I. It is the way, the intrinsic nature and quality of all things. Of all things. That is nothing to do with your papa karma or your kusala. It is the nature of all conditioned phenomenon. If we have a body, if the people, the things that we love are rooted based on rupa, materiality, those rupas, animate or inanimate, will one day come to pass. Because rupa, materiality, cannot endure forever. It goes through changes. This is what it is. So just as when something is broken or something has come to the end of its tenure, we know when to let it go. Ourselves will have to let go of this body one day. This Marananusati is one of the most important parts that makes the Buddha's truth so valid and timeless, both to us, mundane individuals, and to supramundane individuals such as Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and Arhants. Because how great the mind is, materiality will always pass, everyone. Materiality will always one day have to pass. And when it does, the life that we thought we had, yeah, we have our akkas, our mallis, our aunties, our ammas, our tatas, our siyas, all of these changes. When this body is unable to continue, my entire life that I thought my life is would shift and change. I would have a completely different life, a completely different one. And the world, when I am not in my shoes anymore, the world, it moves on. When we look at a funeral, everyone, funerals are quite sad, right? Funerals are quite sad. Not so much because of the person who has died, really, but more so because the way people behave in a funeral, I believe. For me, this is my personal opinion. We've all had a person who's died, right? Maybe not. Maybe, probably we have. We all had a person who's close to us die. Maybe a family member or a friend who we've been, involved in arranging the final ceremony. So maybe we've been that person as well. When a person dies, you will have a barrage of phone calls coming in. People wishing for, condolences, shock to all of these things at the moment a person dies. Then you start organizing the funeral and all of that. And then when it comes to if it is a family, right? Family will start, sometimes families start quarreling about, and usually this comes a couple of days after the funeral, about who spent more and who spent less on the funeral. When it comes to the day of the funeral and the services, you will start getting phone calls from people, from friends who are unable to make it, right? People who knew the departed, who are unable to make it because they're on holidays or they are overseas or they have something that they can't really put off, but they are very, very sad that they can't make it. Maybe sometimes they're actually telling the truth, maybe sometimes they're not. Regardless, they can't make it. And then, of course, on the day that people that you have died or I have died or whatnot or anyone else, when people gather at your house, at the where the body is hosted or wherever, people try to do everything that they possibly can to not talk about the funeral or the person who has died because they want to lighten the mood, isn't it? We want to be a bit more sensitive, so we try not to talk about the person who has died. The most that we might go on to say is, it's so sad, isn't it? But we try to not talk about the person who has died, our loved one, our friend, our relative. And then after the ceremony, and people start drinking, people start making jokes, people start, people who gather around in funerals, in Sri Lanka, my gosh, a funeral is, I don't know, for some it is like a drinking party, which is very, very sad. And I find myself deeply, deeply offended anytime, even if it is not my one of my friends or whatnot. I find it deeply offensive that people start drinking at funerals and loiter about and merrymake when the family is crying. It might be so insolent, but regardless, people do this. Now you see, these are the people that we lived for. These are the people that we entertained. These are the people that we devoted our weekends for, without going to temples, without meditating, without sort of, all of made sacrifices for these people who come and merrymake, can turn your funeral into sometimes of a jolly sometimes, right? And then what happens after the funeral, after you're, buried or burnt or whatnot, cremated? Then people start, now people are planning their, how to get back, you know. Now people are thinking, the thing on their minds is, after your funeral, and how do I get back home? After they get back home, then they carry on with their lives. You become a part of their memory. Some, mostly your family, your close relatives, your loved ones are sad. But then, if there's a lot of property involved, then that comes into question. These things are things that we see, right? Then everyone's looking forward to the reading of the will. Who left, what was left for who becomes a question, even within friends, circles of friends and relatives and close people that we know. Everyone's sort of looking forward to knowing, what was left for who, to kind of have a piece of the tea of the drama. People, this is what makes me sad, because this is the life that we live for people. For people, we make so much of sacrifices only to be reduced to the past when we die. So, what if we understand this? Now we cannot, what do we expect everyone? This is not to say, oh, they should behave otherwise. No, what do we expect? The world goes on. The world simply goes on. This is what the universe, the samsara is. Right? We cannot blame anyone. This is what samsara is. If you are no more, what do you expect people to do? Right? So, what can we do to stop being so foolishly enthralled and excited about this samsara? For if it begins, it needs to end. Devote time to yourself, to living out your life in the way that you enjoy and in a way that you benefit yourself from the mind and the body that you have, living with peace, living with integrity, living with those bits and pieces that we require to attain Nibbana. Because personally, I have no doubt that this has been done again and again and again and again. Just as I am, saying this Bana to you, maybe I have said this Bana so many times in samsara, so many times in samsara. I'm still saying this. Just as you might have been a mother, father, son, and a daughter, and all of these things so many times, countless, absolutely countless times, we're repeating. Let us do something a bit more out of the ordinary. Let us not give in to the hindrances. Let us not give in to akusala. Let us not be enthralled and sort of excited too much and overly engrossed in just making it about merit, but let us simply be able to cultivate a sense of presence and live in the present moment. To let go of the burdens that we carry, to bring joy back into our lives and to live with joy. And with every moment, to learn something more in questioning, how can I live with you on Sumansikara? Maybe we can do that. So today, everyone, the essence of this talk is, let us let go of the taints that creates these thought processes in our minds which are not healthy, which are distracting in nature, which distorts our mind itself. Let us unsubscribe from that pattern of life that gives into these thoughts and embrace the Dhamma in a manner that we let go, that we use the ability of letting go to foster insight, leading ourselves to greater heights in the path, which is in itself peace. Now, even in the moment that we took a deep breath in and let it go, we experience a little bit of peace, isn't it? See, even in that, we don't need to do it 10 days to experience peace. We can do it right now to experience a sense of peace of mind. So why don't we? That if this hour of Dhamma talk has inspired you in some sort of way to put in more effort, to develop more wisdom, Shraddha, and any of the sort, to take up the challenges to do with Vipassana, Samadhi, then of course there is success in this talk and I would be very happy. And of course, sponsors of today's talk, Kanti and Vimala Lakon, together with their sister, whose birthday falls, Dharma De Silva, whose birthday falls today, can also be very happy that you have sponsored and sort of made the occasion for the sharing of Dhamma, which has inspired people in some sort of way to inspire practice, to inspire devotion, to inspire commitment towards nirvana. And that is what is important. And in partaking in this Dhamma talk, in the time that has been spent in speaking the Dhamma, in the commitment made by Arahants, Pacceka Buddhas and Buddhas to present this tradition of Dhamma being passed down, this practice being created and then passed down. This Dhamma has not just appeared from thin air. This practice is based on the foundations of sacrifice. the foundations of pain, the foundations of great amount of time and energy spent in cultivating that which is difficult to cultivate. As the Buddha says, "O bhikkhus, if you do know the extent of blood that has been shed in my own path, in pursuing the aims of nirvana, the volumes of blood would amount to an amount more than the great seas, the four great seas surrounding Mount Meru. O bhikkhus, if you know of the bodies that I have shed and sacrificed, the skeletons, the bones that has been sacrificed in spirit of the path, O bhikkhus, the volume of which will amount to an amount that is greater than the height of the great Mount Meru. This is the amount of bloodshed, sacrifice that has been made by the Buddha in pursuing his path to attain Buddhahood, for which we have the Dhamma today. And to those of you who understand, who participate in the classes and all of that, who are on a journey of Dhamma, realize what amount of truth is found within the Dhamma. What amount of truth is found within the Dhamma. How Dhamma brings such a sense of peace and tranquility to the lives of those in pain, those alone, those having the feeling of alone, those unable to let go, those unable to move on, those stuck and held up in the past. How much of beauty and inspiration this Dhamma has. That Dhamma cannot be destroyed by robe bearers. That Dhamma cannot be destroyed by people who claim themselves to be Buddhist and act in such horrible manners. That Dhamma founded with such peerless sacrifice cannot be hurt by anyone who does not subscribe to the Dhamma. Because within the Dhamma we find the loopholes by which the Dhamma can be destroyed in such a manner are so limited that a person who knows the Dhamma understands this person has given into the kileshas. Especially in this day and age of social media, monks and all of these things, when you're going in the car, it's bewildering sometimes, because when you're going in the car and you're eating from your alms bowl, to take a picture and put it on Facebook is just a thought that never appeared to me when I went in cars and ate from my patra in the car. To take a picture and put it up on social media, it is so funny. But these are the things that happen as people who are in samsara. You and I are both in samsara. We need to realize that these are all kilesha. Right, these are all kileshas, everyone. The people who are in Dhamma would try to isolate themselves even more away from the eye of the public. They do not need their private practices, put on billboards for the whole world to see. That is not the way a arahants or a person whose mind is committed toward enlightenment works. And this, if we cannot understand this is not their flaw. If we cannot understand this is our fault. Because our prajna is not polished enough. So today, Sudharma de Silva Maniyanta මෙන්න මේ ධර්ම දේශනාව තුළින් අපි සියලු දෙනාම ජනිත කරා ගන්න යෙදුනා වූ කුසල් චේතනා සහ ලෝකෝත්තර චේතනාවන් පදනම් කරගෙන අපි ඉදිරියට කටයුතු කරන ඒ සියලු ක්‍රියාවන් වල කුසලාන සංස ධර්මයන්ගේ ඵලයන් වලින් සුධර්ම මෑණියන්ට කිසිම අපලයක් හෝ කිසිම විදියකට නරකක් නොවේවා. මේ ධර්මයේ කටයුතු කරන්නට මේ අපි සියලු දෙනාගේම කුසලාන සංස ධර්ම හේතු වාසනා ශක්තියක් වේවා කියලා අපි ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරමු. ඒත් එක්කම මෙවැනි ධර්ම දාන කරන්නට මෙවැනි ධර්මදාන ධර්මයේ කෙරෙහි ධම්ම කාමයෙන් කටයුතු කරන සෑම සියලු දෙනාටම මෙවැනි කුසල් කර්ම ශක්තියක් වේවා. ඒත් එක්කම මේ නිවන් මාර්ගයේ කටයුතු කරන්නට ඒ නිවන් මාර්ගයේ වෙනුවෙන් යම් කිසි කැපකිරීම කරන්න තිබේ නම් ඒ සියලු කැපකිරීම කරන්නට මෙන්න මේ අපි සාකච්ඡා කරපු ධර්මයන්ගේ ආනුභාව ඵලයෙන් අපි ජනිත කළා ගන්න යුතුනා වූ කුසලාංශ ධර්මයන්ගේ ඵලයෙන් ඒ සියලු බලයන් ඔබ සෑම සියලු දෙනාටද ඔබටද මතද මෙම ශක්තියක් වේවා කිය අපි ප්‍රාර්ථනා කිරීමෙන් මේ අවස්ථාවේ අපි මල්ගේ ඥාතීන්ටද දෙවිවරුන්ටද පින් අනුමෝදන් කරමු. ඉදම් මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු සුඛිතා හොන්තු ඥාතයෝ. ඉදම් මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු සුඛිතා හොන්තු ඥාතයෝ. ඉදම් මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු සුඛිතා හොන්තු ඥාතයෝ. ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහින්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු ශාසනං. ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහින්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු දේශනං. ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහින්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු ත්වං සදාති. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, everyone. So the session will come to a close for today. We usually have meditation sessions happening every Sunday, all of the information of which you can find on our website to the people who are here who would like to join our meditation sessions and the other classes that are being held at the Dhamma Center. The website is currently down, so it will be up in a couple of days. So if you are unable to gain access to the website, don't worry, it will be up in a couple of days. We are going through a website refurbishment, and I would like to thank all of you, and I hope that this Dhamma talk in essence has motivated all of you to make the necessary amendments and to take up the necessary practices to further your practice. Take care, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Teruvan Sannai. Teruvan Sannai.